Metadata. What is metadata exactly? Metadata is nothing but data about data. Okay, so it's still confusing, I know that. Let me give you an example. Let's take any book. In the book, you will have table of contents which explains you what are the chapters in that book and their page numbers and what are the contents of those chapters. So what is table of contents exactly telling you? It's telling you about the chapters and their page numbers in the book, which is like telling you about the content in the book in the table of contents. Similarly, metadata is nothing but it's data about data, which means it will tell you about the data that's there. But this is not data. Metadata is not data. It just is like description of the data. Okay, so in Talent Studio context, when we say metadata, it just refers to reusable configurations which describe the data and its attributes. For example, when we say metadata of a file, which means the file name, file location, and the file schema or the columns. And when we say about a database, metadata of a database connection, then it means the connection details for that database and then the tables and their respective schemas. So in this video we will talk about different types of metadata that we can create in Talend Open Studio and how do we do that, how to create them. Let's start with the database connections. So this course, I designed this course in such a way that I have finished all the jobs and everything. I will explain you each one how I did it, because creating on the fly when I am talking here takes so much time. I don't want to do that. So instead what I did, I already designed whatever is required for this course. I will just explain you how to do each and everything. Don't worry, there won't be any difference. So let's start with database connections. So how do you create metadata for a database connection? As I said earlier, when you create anything, a metadata for any of these, it creates two things. One is the connection in database, you will have the connection details and then the schemas. File, you will have the file location and parsing and then schema separately. Let me show you one example. So this is one metadata I created. Under this you will have, this is when you edit this, it edits the file location and how you parse the file, and when you edit this, it edits the metadata or the schema that you created for that particular file. Okay, so let's first start by creating metadata for a database. Since, as you already know, I have MySQL installed on my computer. Installing MySQL is not that hard. There are so many videos on YouTube, you can follow them and you can install it. If you can't figure something out how to install MySQL, just post that in the comments. Somebody can guide you, or I will help you out how to install MySQL on your computer. MySQL is a free database. You can even install Oracle if you want, but I prefer MySQL. So I installed MySQL on my computer and I started it, so it's up and running. So I will connect to MySQL server, and I will connect to one of the database. I will create a connection to one of the database and then we will go along. Before that, let me explain you the benefits of creating metadata. So as you have already known, we can reuse whatever metadata we created across multiple jobs. That's the main reason we create metadata, which reduces like retyping or creating again. You can reduce the time. If you don't have a centralized metadata, what you have to do, you have to create the same metadata in each and every job. That's Okay, maybe let's say, I don't think that's a lot of work. Let's assume we created like 500 jobs, and 100 of those jobs use same metadata. Let's assume in the future you have to modify that metadata. What you have to do? You have to edit each and every job and then change. Otherwise, if you have a centralized metadata created and you are using that particular metadata in 100 jobs, if you want to change that, all you can do is you will come here and you will edit the connection. That's it. It will update. It will say you are using this schema or this metadata in 100 jobs. Do you want to propagate the changes? Then I will say sure, I want to do that. Then it will apply the changes to all those 100 jobs. That's the another use. And again, you can use it for the impact analysis purposes. For example, I have a connection to a table or a database, and in that I have connection to a table, and one of the column has to be changed in the table. So obviously I have to change those things in my corresponding jobs, talent jobs. So you can do an impact analysis and find how many jobs are impacted by this particular table, changes to this particular table. Then you will get the list of all jobs. Then you can change accordingly or add that column or do some any kind of modification. So when do you have to create metadata? Okay, metadata is mostly created for source and target components, not the processing components. What do you mean by that? Okay, let me show you an example job. Okay, not this. This is not a good example job. Okay, here we have three components. This is called source component, this is called target component, this is called a processing component. It is better to create metadata for source or for target but not for the processing. The processing component should always have a built-in schema. Okay, whereas the source, here it is built-in, but if it in real time, you should use from the repository. The schema should be from the repository for the source. Okay, most of my jobs, they are from repository, but some of them I created the schema on the fly. So that's a best practice. So another scenario is when you have this tmap, and let's assume you are using repository schema in your output, and you have this tmap. So whenever you create columns here, it's always better to propagate from target to source. Why? Because you have your schema from repository here. If you propagate the columns from here to the target, what happens? You will lose your repository reading schema from repository here. It will change into build. So if you are using a target schema from repository, always propagate from this side to that side. So how you will do that? You will just select everything and click on this one. So it will propagate from this side to that side, so that you will preserve the way you are reading your schema. So that's another best practice you have to follow.